2 years. In the last few weeks she's begun to develop an interest in a group of guys that I've never heard of. She insisted they were just high school friends. She began to become withdrawn, spending less time with me and more with this mysterious group of guys. She was going to the bar with 8 guys and no other girls, just her. I became uncomfortable with her going to the bar late at night and I expressed it to her. As you can expect, she asserted that I was being insecure and controlling. I accepted that and laid off. Last night, she went out clubbing with them again. I, in my paranoia, watched her location religiously. She went bar hopping until about 3 in the morning. I then saw her leaving the final club of the night, and I assumed she was headed home. Then, I proceeded to watch her pull into some guy's neighborhood, and completely shut her phone off so I could not see her location, nor send her texts or calls. She did this after already staying out far longer than she said she would, and with no prior notice that she was going to a man's house, drunk. At 3 a.m. she stayed there with her phone completely off for an hour and 30 minutes. Her phone only turned back on when she began to leave the house and come home, which seemed awfully convenient. I, unable to sleep, waited for her to walk in the door to see what story she was going to try and spin. She immediately told me that her phone shut off by accident, which is obviously nonsense. She's an Apple user. I told her I believed she had cheated on me. Then she brought up that 2 years ago I made an off-color joke about her dead grandpa in a Discord chat that didn't include her. Obviously, that was wrong. She was never supposed to hear it. It wasn't even particularly offensive in my taste, but it just seems like a cop-out. Is it safe to say that she probably cheated? I can't see any other reason after a night bar hopping you go back to a guy's house and shut your phone off. She has since gone quiet, won't speak to me. She denied any cheating. Update: she is apologizing and admitting she was wrong. She has now confessed she did shut her phone off but did not confess to any inappropriate behavior beyond that. I suppose breaking up is the best course of action. It just SKS because it's gonna flip my life upside down, living arrangements, the adjustments, etc., but I'll work my way through it. Thanks for all your responses. And then, we have this comment exchanged between OP and other Reddit users. She cheated on me. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. After bar hopping, another man entered your woman for 90 minutes. Sorry for being graphic, but I wanna be crystal clear. She's cheating. Dump the gaslighting post and move on. You are only 21. You shouldn't have a hard time finding her replacement. Good luck and stay strong, pal. Yeah, I pretty much knew this already. Support and advice from you guys has been abundantly helpful through this stressful time. I appreciate your comment. I bet if you went through her phone you'll find all the evidence you need. Tell her it's over and to get out. If she starts to say nothing happened and she doesn't want to lose you, say, if you have not been cheating or doing anything inappropriate with them, then show me your phone right now without you first deleting anything. If she says anything other than here, take it, then she cheated. An attorney's dream case, My Parents vs. Da Bank. Posted by Reddit user Campfires and Conifers. In 1973, my parents had enough money to build a little ranch house in the country. The small bank in town approved the mortgage and the bank signed a contract to give Bob the money to build the house. Bob, as it turns out, was overbooking himself all over town, leaving his clueless minions to do the actual work. The build took longer and longer, with more and more work having to be ripped out and redone. We're not talking about using the wrong color paint or nailing up some wonky trim here. The architect forgot to fully erase a line on the blueprints and the framers built a wall through the bathtub. My mother was told don't put anything heavy in the kitchen cabinets because they were attached to the drywall, not the studs, using a few roofing nails through the back of each cabinet. The garage door opening was framed into the living room instead of towards the driveway, and so on. When the bank's representative showed up for the final inspection, my parents met him in the front yard and refused to sign off on Bob's work. Then the representative became angry as the bank had paid Bob a lot of money. He strode to the front door and pulled on the doorknob, whereupon the entire door, casing included, fell on him. It had simply been wedged, not nailed into place. The bank called Bob, who finally showed up to supervise the work himself. The only problem was that Bob wasn't any better at building a house than his minions were. My parents still refused to sign off on the house. My mother was a stay-at-home mother in a nasty rental with 2 tiny children, while my dad was working 2 jobs while this was going on. Throughout the entire process, the bank and Bob treated them very poorly, bullying my mom and lying to my dad. What should have been an exciting time for my parents was ruined. My mom cried a lot. My dad got depressed. Finally, the bank threatened my parents with foreclosure and Bob threatened to sue my parents for breach of contract because the bank refused to pay him any more money. So, my exhausted parents went to an attorney and gave him the rundown. Plumbing, electrical, tiling issues, the whole sorry mess. My parents were scared. All they had was their small down payment savings. So if this became a lengthy court battle, the bank and Bob would win. The attorney, Tom, was kind, but my dad said he could tell that he and Mom were doomed from Tom's facial expressions as he sorted through the paperwork. Then abruptly, Tom smiled. Let's get everyone together for a meeting, he told my parents. Tomorrow. So my parents, Tom, the bank's representative, the bank's attorney, Bob, and Bob's attorney met at the bank. Tom didn't give anyone else time to begin. He said, well, my clients have decided that they no longer want this house. Please remove it. Everyone else started to laugh. Remove it. Have you lost your mind? Tom, in a sweeping, theatrical gesture, placed a deed on the table. My clients own the land the house is sitting on outright. They no longer want the house. Get the house off my client's land. Bob's attorney stared at the deed and then turned and stared at Bob. You built a house on land you don't own, Bob nodded. The bank's attorney started yelling at the bank's representative. You didn't finance the land the house is on, the representative stammered. No. Congratulations, you played yourself, Tom said firmly as I said, gentlemen. You're trespassing on my client's land. I expect the house to be removed and the land returned to its original state at once. My dad said he'll remember the blank looks everyone on the other side of the table passed to one another for his whole life. Sure, the bank could foreclose on a house that wouldn't exist by the end of the week with no way to recoup the money. They didn't even own the land it was on. Bob was out the 50% he'd paid out of pocket. Plus he was on the hook for tearing down the house and removing it. On top of that, the bank would undoubtedly want him to repay the initial 50% they'd given him. Did they go after my parents? Sure, a foreclosure would have meant bad credit for my parents moving forward. They might lose their down payment, but a sign-off on the house and its condition at that time would have meant thousands and thousands of dollars in cash to replace and repair everything from the roof to the basement before the house could be safely lived in. The bank knew my parents didn't have that kind of money, they're the ones who approved the mortgage. Suddenly, my parents were good people, it was all such a misunderstanding, and the bank and Bob couldn't do enough for them. The house was brought in line with the original blueprints and specifications immediately, at no extra cost to my parents but a considerable cost to Bob. My parents signed the mortgage, Bob got the rest of his money and just about broke even on the bill. The bank's representative was fired, and Tom, attorney extraordinaire, got a stinging tale of triumph to recall the fellow attorneys for the rest of his life. Before you question this tale, please remember that 1973 was 50 years ago. Banks did things differently back then. Smaller rural banks, in particular, were not run the same way the bigger city banks were. There were far fewer federal regulations and a smaller community of people didn't always follow them. Anyway, I'm pretty sure they don't always follow them now. Yes, they built a wall through the bathtub. No, I'm not making that up. I even left out how a plumber left his lunch bag on a partially built kitchen cabinet, but the cabinet maker didn't feel it was his job to move the bag, so he left it there and built the rest of the cabinet around it. I don't know where Bob found these people, but they were gems, every one of them. And then, Reddit user @birdfan added this story in the comments. Oh, for sure. When my Yankee parents moved to NC and had a house built, there were all kinds of shenanigans. My parents got sued and lost due to not having home field advantage, but their attorney said all they have to do is appeal and the appeal will be held in another city. He was right. And they won on appeal. In fact, they won so hard that the judge invalidated the HOA's covenants and all the HOA members got assessed $3,000 to pay the legal fees and to get new covenants done, and the judge told my parents if you want to raise chickens in your front yard, they can't do anything about it now, and the HOA president almost fainted. It all worked out, but only because my parents won the case and people found a way to work things out.